Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Joni. I am the Client Success Manager for APPIC, and we wanted to thank you all very much for joining us today. Today marks a big milestone for APPIC as we've launched the brand new Admissions by Liaison portal, which you will be using to access your applications for this year. For the program directors who are on the line, you should have received an email earlier today inviting you to log into your admissions account. If you have logged in, you'll notice that your admissions portal looks very different from the old selection portal, but I assure you that we haven't changed any of the application content that we gather from the applicants, with the exception of telephone-based sessions. Other than that, all of the application materials are exactly the same as they were in the previous year. And the purpose of today's webinar is to show you how to locate, filter, and review all of that information for your match rankings. It'll be kind of a basic once-over of the admissions portal for today to show you some of the simplified tools that you have to review your applications. And throughout the cycle, we may be offering some more webinars that show a little bit more advanced features and tools that you might be interested in using. But we do have a lot to cover today, so I'll try not to take up too much of your time. I will be handing it over to Reggie, who will be walking us through the admissions portal. And if you have any questions, you can certainly enter them into the chat box that you should see off to the side of your screen. And we'll try to answer those throughout the webinar. And some bigger questions we may hold until the end, where we have a Q&A. So like I said, at the end, there will be a Q&A. So if you feel free to save your questions until then. But I guess without any further ado, please go ahead and take it away, Reggie.
All right, thank you, Joni, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's session. As mentioned, there is a questions area where you can ask any questions that you might have. Feel free to pass those questions along whenever they come to you, and we'll try to address them as soon as possible, but if not, we'll get to everything we can at the end of the session as well. My name is Reggie. I'm a learning strategist here at Liaison International, and I work on a lot of the training material and the documentation and things like that for Admissions by Liaison, which is the software that you'll be using this cycle. So let's get started by talking about the things that are on our to-do list. So we have a few things that we want to cover, and we want to kind of start with the basics of the software. So this is going to be like for the people who are using Admissions by Liaison kind of in a minimalist fashion. We're going to talk about the things that you need to know, and then we'll kind of get into adding more customizations, and we'll get into some slightly more advanced things. And the intent here isn't to cover everything that the software can do, but we want to kind of talk about the basics first, and then give you some ideas of what you can do to take it beyond those features. And for the sake of time, we won't be doing like a super deep dive on any one feature, but again, we want to give you kind of a brief idea of what's going on, and give you an idea of how to use the features that we'll talk about. So again, feel free to ask any questions, and we'll address those as we go along. All right, so let's talk about the basics first. So here we're talking about logging into the software. We're going to talk about viewing the dashboard, how to find applications, and then how to download a PDF. So these are kind of like the bare minimum things that you need to do. If you don't want to go any farther than this, these are the minimum things that you'll the very least that you'll want to know how to do in the software. So we're going to start with this. I'm going to jump into a demonstration of the software. Bear with me a moment to switch over here. All right. So when you log in, you're going to have a page that looks like this one. And we talked about a little bit about this in previous sessions, but just to kind of highlight this again, the idea here is to have kind of the most relevant things to you kind of right at your fingertips once you log in. So it's going to give you information about your applications. It's going to give you information about the different statuses of your applications, and then some other things that may be of interest to you. Now, when we're going through here, everyone's going to have a similar, at least to start, everyone's going to have a similar dashboard to this one. You are able to make some changes to this that we'll talk about a little bit later. But for now, as far as just knowing what's here, this is going to give you kind of the main things, the things that were most queried for, the things that were most looked at on your previous portal. Now, the examples that we have here, since we're kind of just at the beginning of the cycle, we don't have a true representation of this, of what this will ultimately be. You know, as for an example, in this one that we're looking at here, this shows you the tracks that applicants have applied to, and you would get more of a filled out pie chart here under normal circumstances, where you can see kind of which applicants applied to which of your tracks. So this will be filled out with different colors, and you get a little bit more than this in the live environment once the applications start coming in. Another thing worth pointing out here, these are all interactive fields here. So for example, in this chart that says, is this applicant in good academic standing? That's something that's found on the application. And what you'll see here is the number of applicants who this is true of. The answer is yes for them. And you can click on this if you wanted to jump to who those applicants are. If you want to see those applications, you can click on that, and it'll take you to a page where you can see who those applications, who those belong to. And the same thing for the no, we could click there and view those. And this really goes for any field that you see on our dashboard here. And again, this would be more filled out in a normal environment. You'll get other responses coming in and more information filling out in these charts. But this is kind of just to give you an idea of what you'll see eventually, and how you can click on any of these to interact with them and isolate that specific group of applications to work with them. So the next thing we want to talk about is finding specific applications. Now, we mentioned here a minute ago, you can jump to any group of these just by clicking on the number or the group here. Like if you want to see all applications with a complete status, we can click on this and it'll take you right there. But the other way to jump to the applications view is by using this drop down at the top here. This is our navigation menu, and it lets us get to different areas of the software. The one that we want to work with here is called Applications. So we're going to click there, and this remembers our previous filter. So I'm just going to clear this so it'll give you more applications here. And when we get to this, we can see all of the applicants who have submitted their application here. And what we'll be able to do is click through the list of them. If there's more, if they expand past this page, you'll see this menu at the bottom becomes paginated, so you can click to the next group. I believe the limit is 20 on this page, so if there was more than that, you would click through to see the remaining names. Now, for any of these, you can just click directly on their name, and it'll take you to their application. And we're going to take a look at that in a moment here as well. But before we do that, just a couple other things to show you here. If you're searching for a specific applicant or a specific application, you can just enter their name here, and that'll filter for you, and you'll be able to find that applicant. Another thing that's worth pointing out here is if you want to, again, kind of filter the applications that you're seeing here, you can click on any of these. There's some pre-built filters here. So you can click on any of these. If you only want to see the applications that are in this review complete status, you can just click that and it'll take everyone else out for you. Same thing for under review. If you click on that, it'll just show you those. So those are just kind of some built-in filters there that you can use. And we'll talk a little bit later, we're going to talk about how you can add your own filters and kind of build on this. But again, if we're just talking about kind of bare minimum that you'll want to know, this is the applications view. Those are all of your applications, and you can kind of use these preset filters if you want to isolate a specific group here. Now let's take a look at an application. And I'm going to change my zoom here because I think this is zoomed too far in, so it's not showing us the whole view. There we go. So here's the application. Again, on the left-hand side, you can use this menu to kind of click around and view different sections of the application. Just by clicking here, it'll take you to the different areas, the different menus of the different sections of the application. You'll get there by clicking on these. And that's kind of a quick way to find if there's something in particular that you're looking for, if there's some information that you know you'll want right away, you can use those menus to kind of jump around and get to what you're looking for here. A key area that I'll point out here, if we scroll down a little bit further, one of the key areas here is the information if we scroll down further, you'll see there's an attachments area here. So if there's any attachments that have been added to the application, you'll be able to find this by jumping to this area. And unfortunately, in our demo version here, we don't have any live ones to show you, but this is where all of that information would be. Anything that they included as an attachment to the application, you'll see that here. Another area to point out here is on the right-hand side, and there's a few things of note here. This, first of all, it tells you what phase the applicant, this application is in, and it tells you if a decision has been placed on them. If there is an evaluation that's being done on the application, you can see that here. And what we want to point out is if you go to the More Options menu here, one of the options you'll see is Export. And this allows you to export the application as a PDF. So again, if all you want to do is just take that, take this applicant's information and put it into a PDF format, and you don't necessarily want to kind of work on this view, all you'll need to do is go to this More Options icon here at the top right and go to Export. And you'll see right at the top, the first option there is Default PDF. So if we click Generate on that, this is going to process this application as a PDF for us. And when it's done, it gives us a link to click on to download it. One other thing to point out about that, I'm going to back up here a second. One other thing to point out about that, if you had clicked away from that when it's processing the application, the generation of that, if you clicked away from it, you can always go back to any applications that were generated or any exports that were generated just by clicking here. This is a little downloads icon at the top here. And this shows you any applications that any PDFs that you had generated or any other exports that were at some point generated. You can kind of go through the history of them here. So you'll be able to get back to that if you need to download it again. I'm going to jump back into the application again here. So again, those are the kind of the main things that you'll need to know, the bare minimum, finding an application and getting the PDF out of it. Before we go on here, Joni, I do want to give you an opportunity if there's anything else we should mention before we talk about some of the more advanced things.
Well, did you want to show on that previous screen the ability to download PDFs in bulk?
Yeah, let's talk about that. If we go back to this menu here, so if you wanted to, say for all of these applications, or maybe just a select subset of them, you can click on the group that you're interested in. But if you want to download a PDF in batch, there's, instead of doing it individually like we just showed you there, you can do this in batch too, just by clicking on the names that we want. Or if we're doing this, we clear this out and we're looking at all of these, you can do a select all just by clicking this little checkbox at the top here. And now we choose the option to export. And again, we're going to choose default PDF here. When we click generate, it does the same thing. Now, depending on the size of the group that you're downloading here, this could take a little bit longer to generate it. It generally doesn't take a very long time, but it could take a little bit longer, of course, than what you'd get if you were just doing one. So in that case, this might be a situation where, yeah, looks like that just finished. But in that case, this might be a situation where you might minimize it and go away, continue working on something else. And again, that will still be available for you. You can click on it here to get that file. but that would still be available for you, again, by clicking on the downloads area here.
And if you also notice where Reggie had clicked to do actions there, he clicked on the checkbox at the top that it automatically includes everyone, and you can see there's some batch actions that you can do there. Like so you just exported a bunch of PDFs, but you can also email and set phases. So if you want to do things in batches, you can't do everything in a batch, but there are options for some items.
Joni, this is Mary. I have a question with respect to the batches. For, say I assign a certain number of applications to a reviewer, can they then do the similar thing? So these are specific ways in which you can do batches. And does it include also like assigning them that then that person can download a batch if they were a reviewer?
So I think that if you assign a bunch of applicants to a user, they could do certain things in batches. But if you're asking about assigning in batches, that's
okay. You understood, yeah, the initial question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right, Reggie. Like if you're assigned to 10, 15 different people, can you perform batch updates on those folks?
That's right, yeah, and depending on your on the permissions, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here, but depending on the permissions that they have, they might be set to only be able to see those applications that you've assigned to them, and in that case, they'll have, like for example, if it were just these 5 applications that were assigned to me, I would see these and I would have all the same options with the batch items here. Again, permissions permitting. If exporting is one of the permissions that are enabled for them, they'll be able to do that right from there.
Nice. And every application, even if you download them in bulk, they're going to bulk download into a separate PDF, right? Like each applicant will have its own distinguished
that's
PDF.
Right. Yeah, and that's good to point that out. So if you are doing an individual PDF export, like we talked about earlier, and I'll just show that again real quick here. If you're doing it individually, just by going to the more options icon up at the top here and choosing to export, this gives you one single PDF file as your download file. If you're doing a batch download, it's going to come out as a zip file instead. So you'll unzip it, and then each of these will have their own PDF bundled into that zip file. So that's how that will work if you're doing it in batch.
Thank you.
All right, great. So we talked about some of those main things, kind of the basic things that we want to make sure everyone is familiar with when working in admissions by liaison. Now we're going to talk about a little bit of the more advanced things. So let's step this a little bit further, and we're going to talk a little bit about adding reviewers, and we'll talk about how you can configure their permissions, and we're going to get into some things you can do with your dashboard to customize it, and also add phases so you can categorize your applicants. So these are kind of the next level of things if you want to get a little bit past the minimum. And again, it's important to note that kind of every institution is going to have their own process as far as how they decide to go about this. So there's not necessarily one way of doing this, and you have the ability to decide which of these options you want to use, how far you want to go into the different options that are available to you. So let's talk about stepping it up with a few more options here. I'm going to jump back into admissions, and the next thing we'll get into is adding reviewers. So I'm going to go to the navigation menu at the top here, and we're going to click on settings. And the settings menu is where you go to do any configuration in the software. So if you need to add different users, or if we want to add phases, or if we want to set up evaluation forms or anything like that, do the exports, all of that is done in the settings menu. And we're going to talk more about some of those other things as well here. But for now, let's talk about adding users. So we're going to click on users here. It's under organization. One thing I should point out here too, if there is a setting that you're looking for that you're having trouble finding, there is a search option for it. So you can just type in what it is that you're looking for, click on it here, and it'll take you right to it. Let me jump back here to users. And so from here, you'll see all the users that you currently have in the available in the software. And to create a new user, it's pretty straightforward here. All we did was click that new user button, and then we would just type out the user's name. And the main things that are important here are the first name, the last name, and the email address. And then you have the ability to decide what role they should be in, and roles is what we're going to talk about next. But roles is where you decide what permissions you want them to have. If you want to restrict their permissions in any way, here's how you would do it. And you can build these roles yourself to decide what permissions each of these should entail. But again, to create a new user, all you need to do here, first name, last name, email address, and even if you don't have a role for them, you can leave them on no role for now. But once you set that up and click on create user here, that sends them an email and allows them to go in and set up their own password and everything. I'm going to jump back here and go into the roles area. Now there is, by default, there's an administrator role, and that essentially gives full access to everything. So if you, the way that you kind of operate at your institution is it's just you, or maybe it's just a couple of you, and you don't need to restrict permissions for any reason, then you can just create users and give them all the administrator role, and that will work. If you need to add separate individuals as reviewers, and maybe you want to step down their permissions a little bit, maybe you want to restrict certain things from them, that's where the roles comes into play, and building roles, that's where that comes into play. So let's talk about creating a role. I'm going to click create role here. And in this example, we'll just call this, the name of this role, interviewers. And roles, again, roles are just a set of permissions that you set up for different groups of users. So in this permission set, you'll be deciding what they can do in the software. You'll be deciding what they can see, the information they can see, and you'll decide if there's any restrictions that should be applied to them. And you do that all by creating the role. So here what we're going to do, we'll go in and name the role. We said interviewers, and then here's for application review. What do we want them to be able to do? So if we want them to have any application review permissions, we're going to check this box off for application review, and then we can decide what we want them to do. Do we want them to view reviews? If so, we check that off, and you'll see it moves over to the left-hand side here. Do we want them to be able to review applications? We check that off, and it adds it here. Anything that you don't want them to do, you just leave that off to the right-hand side here, and then they can't do that. The same thing with the other permissions that we see here. If you want them to have access to any of the application management permissions, you can check off the ones that you want them to have. If you want them to work with any of the general settings, if you want them to be able to invite new users, or if you want them to be able to adjust roles, any of those things, working with email settings, you can check those off, that whatever you want them to have access to. Now when we get to the bottom here, here's where we get to determine which group of applications this group of users will be able to see. So the default here is all applications, but you can choose a segment to limit this. Maybe you only want them to see the applications that are in the complete status, or maybe you only want them to see the ones that are in the receive status. If you have any limitation like that, you can add that here, and the members of this role will only be able to see the applicants that are within this segment of applications. If you're okay with them seeing all the applications, you can leave that as the default, and they'll see all of them. The last thing to point out here is if there's anything that you want to hide from them, any data point, any piece of information that you don't want them to see as far as what's on the application, you can add that here. And there's a handy search field here, so if there's things that you're looking for, you can just use the search field, and you can add that. You can add that here. So like if we wanted to hide country of citizenship, we would just check that one off, and that becomes a field that's hidden from them, so they can't work with that. Once we're done with the configuration here, all we have to do is click Create Role. Now this interviewer's role is one that's set up for us. And if we go back to users, we can either edit one of our existing users, or if we click Create User, here we'll see that interviewers is a role that we can add to them, and all those permissions that we set up will immediately apply to their account as soon as we create their account. Joni, anything else we should mention about adding users before we talk about a few other things here?
Well, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I mean, this is a brand new system, which means that we've created accounts for all of the program directors as they're listed on the APPIC directory, but we cannot create all of the roles for the thousands of other individuals who are members of other institutions, and we can't carry that information over, unfortunately, because we're talking about two separate systems here. But as you said in the roles ability, Reggie, you can give the ability to somebody else to add more users. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. If you there's a permission that's listed here. Manage users, manage roles, that will allow them to have that permission as well.
Yeah, so if you have a lot of people that you need to create accounts for, you know, if you have somebody else who's assisting you, you can make sure that they have permissions to create users or invite users, and then you can sort of share that responsibility amongst a few people. Just for any of the sites who have a lot of users that they need to add, we know it's kind of a pain in the neck, but we just, you know, it's a brand new system, so unfortunately we couldn't carry those users over.
Joni, I do have another question with respect to all of the different permissions that someone can have. Are there definitions of what some of these are? Because a lot of them look new, so we may not know what they are in granting or restricting.
A good question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Reggie. I was like, I don't know if we have like a key.
So on the Help Center, we do have all the permissions listed out and defined. So you will be able to find that on the Help Center.
Reggie, why would we want to impersonate an applicant?
So this is, I don't think this is something that you would need to do at this stage. Mm-hmm. There are some things that I think are in the works where applicants will be able to go on and do things like on your own portal at some point. I don't think there's anything built for that yet, so I don't think the impersonation will actually do anything for you at this point.
Okay.
But yeah, good question. All right, so let's talk about some of the other things you can do here. I'm gonna jump out of this area and let's talk a little bit about, I'm gonna go back to the dashboard here. So everyone, like we mentioned earlier, everyone has this default dashboard that's assigned to them, and there's a bunch of things that you can do from here. But perhaps you want to adjust this dashboard. Maybe there's some other data point that you want. Maybe you want to reconfigure one of the data points that's here. You can do that. The way to do it is just by clicking Edit Dashboard here, and you can make changes. Now, it's worth pointing out here, if you do make a change here, it is you can revert it, so you don't have to worry about if you mess something up, you can revert it and get back to that default dashboard, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Another thing to point out here is if you make the change this way, this is just changing it for you. So if you have multiple users, if you have other reviewers or anyone else, it's not changing it for them. And we'll talk about how you can change it for them as well. But this is just changing it for you. So here we can go in and say, for example, the US citizen, maybe we don't want to know if they're a US citizen, maybe we want to know if they're a Canadian citizen instead. So here we can change the field that we're looking for here. and we would just type in the field that we need information on. So we could just change this to country of citizenship. And again, in our live environment, if we adjusted this in the eventual environment, you'd get a list here of the countries of citizenship, and it'll give you the number for each of them. Unfortunately, we can't demonstrate that exactly here, but that's what that would look like if you were to adjust this field. Another thing that you can do here is if you click rearrange, you can move things around. Maybe you want some other information up at the top. We take military status, say you want to have that at the top instead, you can do that, and now that's at the top. So there are a bunch of configurations you can do. You can add new fields, you can add, you can adjust the way that these fields look. Maybe you don't want this to appear as this type of chart, maybe you want it to appear as a pie chart instead. You can kind of play with some of that too. And it's really just up to how you want it to appear. If you find it might be better for this to look a different way, you can certainly make those adjustments here as well.
And Reggie, basically any item on the APPI is fair game for this dashboard.
That's right. Yeah, anything that's on the application, you'll be able to find a field for it to add here to the dashboard. So any information that you want to include here is available. Now I'm going to click revert here just so it doesn't save what I've done. But if you do, if you were ready to save these changes, just click save, and it'll have your updated dashboard here. The next thing we want to talk about is phases. So let's jump back to applications here. And one of the things that we mentioned is that up at the top here, there's different phases that are listed, and you can kind of click on them to just see applications that are in that phase. So this is what's pre-built for you. You'll have this automatically, but maybe in your instance of admissions by liaison, you might want to add some more categories here. Instead of just need to review, under review, review complete, maybe you want to add some. Maybe you want to add phases for applications who were invited to interview, or maybe those who are currently, if they've gotten to a certain stage of the application, maybe you're ready to accept them. Whatever the case might be, you can create as many different phases as you want, and those will be listed here when you do. So let me just show you briefly how you would do that. We're going to go back to the settings menu here. And again, a quick way of finding things, you can find this in the application review area. But again, if you had to find something, if you weren't sure where to find it, you can just click on that search bar and enter it there. This will jump us to that area. So you'll see here are the phases that are built so far. If we click manage, then we'll have an option to create a phase. And we can say invited to interview, and then it'll just ask us to enter. We can really add anything here. This is just another way of labeling that phase that you're creating here. And then you can really from here, all you would need to do is hit add. You're done adding it. But if you did need to add an evaluation form, something we're going to talk about a little bit later here, if you did want to associate some type of evaluation with the applicants in this phase, you'd be able to do that from here as well. But for now, we can just say we'll create the phase, we'll add phase. Now that phase becomes available here. We could save our changes. If we wanted to rearrange it, we can click around here and do that. We'll save that like it is. And now when we go back to our applications, we'll see we have this new phase that's added here. And if we wanted to move an applicant into that new phase, once we click on the application, over on the right-hand side, we have the option of changing their review phase. So we can just move this application into that new phase. And then if we go back to our applications view, now we'll see there's an application here. So again, this is another area that's really going to be dependent on what your process is, what makes sense for you personally, how you want to categorize the applications. Again, you can look at these as different kind of different buckets to place applications in. And if in your process you have a different phase or a different period of time that an application might go through, you can add that here and then add applications to it. Another thing to point out here is that you can add applications to a phase in batch. So I just clicked on a couple of those. You'll see there's an option here to set phase, and here you can choose what phase you want to place them in. So phases is another way of kind of categorizing your applications and keeping track of where they are in your process.
And Reggie, if I could just sort of add to this, phases aren't anything that you're required to do. You don't have to place an applicant into a phase. It's not going to screw anything up if you don't. The phase is something that we created based off of a request that we had received from some training directors saying that they would appreciate some sort of tool that helps them understand what process they're in with each applicant. When you get hundreds of applicants, sometimes it's hard to remember where you left off. So building a phase and adding different buckets that pertain to you and your process is a way to help you kind of have a workflow for your review process. But again, it's not anything that's required. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out, Joni.
Mm-hmm. So Reggie, could you get super creative and build a bucket? So for example, this year, there are going to be, because of COVID and practica being significantly truncated, if not ceased for many of the applicants this cycle, their practicum hour, their assessment hours in particular, are going to be extremely low. And so would it be possible for a training director to get really creative and create a bucket of looks great except for assessment hours? And so they want to kind of see how it's going and then go back to that bucket?
Yeah, you definitely could do that. Any category that you can think of, any group that you might want to set aside for doing any type of action, you can create all those as different phases and then add applications as you see fit to all of those.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you.
All right. So the next thing that we'll talk about, let's advance this to the next step. So we talked again, we started with the basics, then we jumped into kind of a little bit more that you can do. Now we're gonna notch it up once more, and we're gonna talk about some more kind of a little bit of advanced things that we can do here. And again, all of these are optional. None of them are things that you have to use to work with the software, but these are just other options that you can have to pull more, get more advantage from the software. So we're going to talk about setting up filters, creating filters in the software, and we're going to talk a little bit about tags and how you can use those to even add more categorizations for your applicant pool. And then we're going to talk about exports and evaluation forms. Okay, so let's jump back in here. And let's see if I can get my mouse back here. Okay, so here we are back on the applications view here, and there might be things that we want to use, that we want to look for, and ways that we want to group our applications that that aren't one of the pre-built filters or one of the pre-created segments that are listed here. And you really can create a query for anything that's on the application, any information that you might want. So maybe you want to find all the applications with above a certain number of assessment hours, or maybe you want to find those who have above a certain number of intervention hours or reports written, things like that. anything, again, if it's on the application, you can create a filter for it. So to do that, we're going to go over here on the left-hand side and click Add Filter. And most of the things like that that's on the application will be under the form category. There's a bunch of different categories that you can look for, like phases and segments here that you can filter for. But we're going to go to form, since this is a question that's on the application. And we'll just search for it here. So we're going to type in hours, and we can look for the field that we're interested in. So if we want to find assessment hours, and we're going to say is, say, greater than or equal to, and for this example, we'll just say 100. And I'm not certain if something's going to come up from these, but what it's going to do is look through all of your applications and find any applicant who had a value here of 100 or greater. And yeah, so it looks like it found those three. So it filtered out the others that didn't match that query and left us with the ones that do. We can continue building on this if we wanted to add more filters. Again, we can go back here. Maybe we want to look for something else here. Maybe we want to find the, let's see, go back in the search here. If we want to find number of articles published, and I'm going to say is greater than or equal to, for this example, we'll just say 1. We'll apply that. And yeah, it looks like still to meet that query. So now, one other thing, once you add that second filter there, if you have more than one filter, you'll see that you have the option here. If you want the applications that are on this, that are found here, that meet your query, if you want them to have both of these, or either. So if we say or, this is going to find anyone who has either assessment hours of greater than or equal to 100, or have at least one article published. Or we can change this back to and it's only going to give you those who have both of these criteria met. And you can continue adding more filters here and kind of go on from there. So you can make it as specific as you want. Again, if it's on the application, you can add it here, and you can use these items, these queries. You can use them and come back to them later by clicking the Create Segment here. So if we click Create Segment and we say, assessment hours / articles published, all we would need to do here is click Create Segment. It'll save this for us, and then we can go back to this segment. One thing that's important to know here is that if you do save your segment here, it is going to be, it's a dynamic segment. So in other words, as more applications come in, as the information on the application is updated, these segments will update as well. So if there's more applications that come in that now meet this criteria, they'll be added here. So this isn't just like a static list that's going to give you a snapshot of what it looked like at the time. These are going to keep updating. So if you click Create Segment here, again, it's going to keep that segment for you, and then you can revisit it. If we clear all of this, we can revisit our segments just by clicking Segments and finding the one that we just built within this group. So that's just another, again, a little bit more of an advanced thing that you can do. But if you're trying to drill down and work with specific groups of applications, you can do that with the filters here. Let's go into another application here and talk about another thing you can do. We're going to talk about adding tags here. So we mentioned how with phases you can categorize your applications and determine kind of where they are in your process or what needs to be done with them and that kind of thing. But another way of adding a customization is using the tags. So you can add a tag for anything that we discussed like that as well. So the example Kimberly gave earlier, if you have, if you want to create a tag that says application looks good aside from assessment hours or whatever it is that you're looking for, you can create a tag for that. So I'm going to say application good, revisit for hours as an example. So we add that here, and then this is going to reload and put that tag on the applications. And now we can go to any other application and add that same tag, And then when we're ready to, maybe a few weeks down the line, maybe a couple months later, we want to come back and find everyone that we placed that tag on, we can do that using the filters that we discussed earlier. So if we back out here and we want to look for a filter, we can just go to tags and we look for the tag that we want. In this case, that's the only one that we have here. And then we apply this, it's going to give us everyone who we placed that tag on. So again, the tags can be whatever you want them to be, whatever makes sense for your purpose. If you need to set aside a group of applications for a certain thing, or if you want to mark them in a certain way, whatever it is that you need to do, you can create a tag for that as well. And then that's just another way, again, of categorizing your applicants and being able to kind of work with them in groups later, if that's something that you need to do. Let's talk about exporting. We mentioned before you can export PDFs of the applications individually or in batch. You can also export applicant data as spreadsheets. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you a brief example for the sake of time. We won't go too far into the details here, but I want to give you at least a brief idea of how to go about creating that. So you'll find that here by going into the import-export area. And I'm going to click on exports and create export. And you'll see there's a bunch of different options. You can make it a PDF file, so you can customize that PDF that we showed you how to generate. You can make a custom version of that where you select certain sections of the application to be included and all of that. But for this purpose, we want to talk about creating a spreadsheet export. And all you're doing here is giving this a name, deciding what style of export it's going to be. So it can be, the default is common delimited, so it'll give you a CSV file with just common delimited. And the other options here are tab delimited or fixed width. So if you just want, a simple file that's going to open up in Excel, you can leave this at common delimited. That'll work fine. And then the main thing here is to then choose what fields you want to be included on this. So you'd probably want the applicant's name. So we can grab that information. Maybe we want their hours included. So let me just drop those in. Maybe we also want some information on, maybe we want the phase that they're in. And again, so everything that's on the application is going to be available to you here, including the things that you set up. So you'll be able to get phases. You'll be able to pull out the tags that you've placed on them and things like that. That's available to export as well. And if there's something that you're looking for that you need to find, you can just add that here. So maybe you want to find the articles published again. You just start typing that, and now that's a field that we can export here as well. One other kind of little bit more advanced thing, some of these fields that you'll notice are named in a way that looks maybe a little bit difficult to decipher here because it's breaking it up and has a long name there. If you want that to show up differently in your export, this title is editable, so you could just type this and make it more visible, make that whatever you want it to be called, and that's how it will show up in your spreadsheet when you do that. So now if we pull all the fields that we want to include here, we can kind of rearrange them and decide how we want this all to be ordered in the spreadsheet. And then all we're doing here is clicking Create Export. It adds that as an export here. And then all we need to do is go to our applications again. We choose whatever application we want to export. And that new file that we just created is listed here. So you'll see sample spreadsheet. We can go ahead and generate that file and it'll work the same way as what we just saw here. So there's some more advanced things that you can do with the exports, but that's just kind of the basic idea. If you did want to create your own export with your own information, your own customized version of it that you can open up in Excel and share it and save it or do whatever else you want with it, that's the way to go there. One other thing I want to get to, and then we'll see if we can cover more questions here. One other thing I want to talk about, one of the more advanced things that you can do in the software is creating your own evaluation forms. And this is maybe you want to keep track of interview results, or maybe when you have reviewers coming in, you want them to respond to specific questions about the application. And you want to give them a place to capture all of that. Well, you can create an evaluation form to do that. So we're going to go back into settings. And this time we want to find our evaluation forms, and that should be under here, under application review. Again, reminder, you can just search for whatever you're looking for up here. But I'm going to click on evaluation forms from here. And if we click on create form, it's going to ask us to name the form. So I'm just going to call this, we'll just call it interview results for now. And again, it asks you to enter a key. That's just so it can give this, I already named one that. This is just so you can give this, so it gives the form a name for to be used in the background, so you don't really have to worry about what you call it. You just have to put something there. And now you're building a form that's going to appear on the evaluation tab for the applicant. So whatever you want your reviewer or your interviewer to respond to here, whatever information that you might need them to capture. So maybe it's a matter of maybe the interviewer is asking the applicant what are their career goals, or maybe they're asking them you know, what their strengths and weaknesses are. You can add those as questions here. So we can say, we'll just give that a name, and then you can decide how you want them to respond to this question. Do you want the reviewer or the interviewer to respond in text? If so, you can leave it at that. You'll see there's a bunch of options here. We won't cover all of them, but just to kind of give you some ideas. You can also leave this as a multiple choice, where you type out options that the reviewer can choose from. You can make it a scale. So you can say a scale from 1 to 10. So they're just grading this applicant from 1 to 10 on this, in this area. So we'll just add, I gotta put a key in for this one too. So I'll just call that goals. We'll add this. So that's the first thing that they're gonna respond to. And then maybe we want them also to say what their strengths and weaknesses are. You could make this a more detailed question, but just for the sake of time, we'll abbreviate that. And then we can make this a numeric. If we want them to respond with a number, we can do that as well. That's another option. For the case of, for this example, I'll just make this another scale. We'll make this 1 to 10 again. And then we will put in, oops, that's not where I wanted to do that. We'll put in a key here. And we can continue building here. Whatever you want your reviewer or your interviewer to respond to. Let's say interview results. We'll give that section a name here. And we'll give some information for the interviewer. And again, so we could continue adding sections here. We can add more questions as much as we want here. And if we want to preview what it's going to look like, there's an option here that says try it. And this shows you what it's going to look like on an evaluation form. So they'll have those 2 questions and have those scales where they can put in their answers. Let's just show you quickly though. We'll save this. I think it's giving me, well, let me, just for the sake of time, we'll back out of this one. But whenever you add an evaluation form, then the next thing that you can do is associate that with one of your phases. So we're going to say anyone who's in this invited to interview phase should have this interview results form associated with them. And then here we can decide who we want to be assigned, so we can choose specific users to add here. And that, again, it gets a little bit more advanced, but here's where you would go to pick individual users that you want to assign to anyone who's in that phase. But for now, we'll just leave this like it is. So if we go back to, oops, let's save this. So now if we go back to our applications and we look at the one who's in the invited to interview area here. And once this loads up, we'll see, we're going to go back to the evaluation tab here. And there, everything that we set up is going to show up in this tab, all the questions that we wanted them to respond to. So they'll be able to go in here and put in their results and click save when they're ready. And that saves that information, and that's available to you later. So again, that's kind of a brief idea. We're going to have more information on this in future sessions. We'll be able to kind of dive into that a little bit more. But that's just to give you kind of a brief idea of what you can do in this area, some of the more advanced things that you can do. Mm-hmm. So with that said, those are the main things we want to cover. We do want to give an opportunity for any questions that anyone might have now. So I'm going to turn the floor over Kimberly or Joni if there's anything that we should address now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know there's definitely been questions coming in. I am having a hard time reading them. They're kind of minimized. Is that everybody is agreeing that it's the same thing? We can try going over them. I just can only kind of see them one by one.
I've tried to respond to a few, Joni, and they are very difficult to read. I'm not sure why they're scrunched there together, but thanks. If you could see them, that'd be great to go over them. I've tried to provide a few of those answers. And I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can.
Kimberly or Mary.
I mean, I can't really pick them in order, but I guess we'll try to. So it's one of the things that's I clicked on here is something simple. How do you sort applicants by what track they've applied to? That is a filter. It's actually a filter that we've already put on the dashboard. It's if you have only one track, that particular chart isn't going to look very fancy. But if you have multiple tracks, you'll see on that particular pie chart that you'll have multiple pieces of pie based on all the tracks. And you can actually click on every single one of those charts. They're all interactive. If otherwise, if you just want, like Reggie showed, you can go under certain settings, certain parts of your account, and you can just filter. So you can filter just based on a track as well. Reggie, I don't know if you want to show that real quick, just how to filter something.
Yeah, let me jump back to our admissions view here. Yeah, so in that example, it was filtering for a specific track, was it? Like a specific program?
Yeah. So just, I mean, basically, filtering, you can filter on so many different items in admissions, right? And track is definitely one of them. So I guess we would just want to show the screen where you can build a quick filter.
Yeah, so now in this example, would the tracks that they're looking for be separate from the programs that are listed? Or is that just what we're looking for, the program?
I think it's program is what we're looking for. Yeah. So there's the organization and then there's programs. Some of them are only going to have one program, but you should be able to filter based on program.
Yeah. So a quick way of doing that, this is pre-built for you. You won't have to add a filter for it. If you have separate programs, a quick way of doing that is just by clicking this drop down here and then jumping into your.
Anything, Reggie.
Oh, sorry. That explains that. Let me switch my screen over. Apologies for that. All right, yeah, so a quick way of doing that, this is kind of a built-in filter here. So if you're looking for, if you have multiple programs for applicants to choose from, you can just, this is a pre-built filter here, so you'll be able to go in and just choose the program and it'll take out anyone who's not in that particular program. In this example, there's only one, so it doesn't filter for us. But yeah, that's a quick way that you can add a filter right from there.
Awesome. For anybody who didn't get the email this morning, please do check your spam. But if you didn't get the email, you can certainly reach out to customer support. I put that information in the chat earlier. I can put it in there again. If you want to call the number or just send an email saying you didn't get the invite, we can try sending the invite again. If your information is updated as the new training director on the APPIC directory, you should have received an invite. But if it's not updated, you're definitely going to want to go and update the directory, and then you can let us know and we can create an account for you. What are the questions that we got here? A couple of people have said that it doesn't work great in Internet Explorer. That is true. We try to recommend things like Firefox and Chrome. Internet Explorer, even if you have the most recent version, it's just not extremely compatible with a lot of the up-to-date software. So we do recommend trying to switch over to Chrome. For folks who are at the VA, we do realize that this is a problem, and I do think the VA is looking into what they can do about getting this type of access permitted on those systems. But if you can move over to something other than Internet Explorer, we would definitely recommend it.
Dr. Dahl had a good question about if they create users for this year's applicant review, will those be carried forward next year for the application review?
So just the accounts will all carry forward. So you're just going to have to create them. Is that what we asked for, user accounts? Will they carry forward?
Yes. So if I create 5 reviewers this year, do I have to create those same 5 reviewers next year, or will they carry forward?
No, they should still have access. You're not going to have to recreate accounts every year. It's just this year because we had thousands and thousands of accounts and we just couldn't port them all over to this different system. We have to basically recreate them this one time, but they'll carry over each year from that.
And Dr. Adkins wants to know if they can, if the PDFs, if they download those PDFs, will they be there for the reviewers to see, or does she have to email them to the different reviewers?
The reviewers have access, again, based on their permissions, right? But the reviewers will have access to everything that the training director has access to. So if the training director assigns them to a particular applicant, they can go in and they can download that applicant's PDF.
So I think she's asking, since she's the training director and she downloads the PDF, does that stay visible for the reviewer, or will the reviewer have to do what you just said, to download their own PDF?
I think they're going to have, Reggie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're going to have to download their own PDF, right?
Because it's going to go to the hard drive or where they designated, not to the, it's not going to stay in the visible application.
Right. Yeah, that's an option that's only visible under the account that created it. So they'll be able to see that if they have the permissions to view the exports, it'll be the one that's listed there, and all they have to do is click on it to generate it on their side. But they won't be able to go into that downloads area and access it. That only shows the exports that you generated on your account.
Great. And Dr. Terry wanted to know if you can restrict certain things from view, or actually wanted to know some examples of what you might restrict from view from the interviewer. Perhaps other interviewers' comments, perhaps gender, perhaps age. I don't know if you're going to see age, but I know gender and a few others. So I think you can restrict several of those options there if you want to keep it neutral as possible. Is that right, Kimberly? Does that make sense? I know we talked about that.
Right. They won't see gender anyway. That's already not shown, but I think, right, that's just, if you really wanted if there's a particular variable your internship selection committee has deemed somehow it gives one certain group of an advantage over another, and so you just want to exclude that variable from your selection, you have the power to do that.
So if you wanted to exclude a certain letter or a certain section, I'm trying to think of an example of when you would want to do that.
Well, I think it would be particularly useful if we actually included demographic variables. So going forward, if in the end we do end up adding that, but based on public comment, we haven't changed that for this cycle, you still won't see demographic information. So I think there will be many sites that might want to not look at that. if at some point in the future we added that. But at present, I'm trying to think of what variable.
I'm thinking maybe if you have a section for reviewer comments, you might want to restrict that view to only the training director as opposed to all reviewers.
Yeah. But in terms of actual APPI variables, I'm not quite sure what that would be in terms of what the student fills out, but there probably is something because programs have unique needs and systems. So it's a neat feature.
I'm sure you can drill down. If you don't want them to see how many Rorschachs they've given, you could delete that or eliminate that.
Right.
We had another question. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say we had another question here, Reggie, about the dashboard and about the independence of it. You know, so this template that everybody has right now, everyone has the same dashboard, but as you make changes to the dashboard, you're only making edits to your own. Reggie, if a training director creates a filter that they really want all of their reviewers, like let's say they get their dashboard exactly the way they want it and they want their reviewers to have the same charts and whatnot on their dashboard, is that a matter of them communicating and saying, hey, we, you know, create this on your dashboard? Or is there any sort of default dashboard that can be created by someone that can then, you know, be used, not everyone using the same dashboard, but do you understand what I mean, Reggie, about having them design it so that it's the same as yours?
Yeah. So you can do that, and you'll need to implement roles. So you'll need to use roles to make that happen. But what you can do here, because the dashboard is essentially just a report that's built in the software, the way to create your own customized version that you kind of assign to other people is to go into the reports. There's one here that's listed as default dashboard already. And if you have the permission to do that, to edit this, you can edit it from here and make whatever changes that you need to make, or you can kind of start from scratch and build your own. So you can just click create report, and this kind of gives you a blank slate. But long story short, once you create that, if we go back into settings here, and let's go back to roles, what you'll see is if you maybe want all your reviewers to have the same dashboard, so here we can change it from the default dashboard to, you know, whatever other dashboard that we have built here, and they would all be listed there. All the reports that we create will be listed there. So that's how you would change it if you wanted to change it and make it unique for a specific group of users.
Reggie, here's another good question that Dr. Fitzgerald Smith has. If she creates a new user, will they automatically get an email with their credentials, or does she have to send those to them individually?
Yeah, so it sends out an email, and it doesn't have their password, but it gives them a link to click on, and it'll take them to where they can set up their own password.
I think Dr. Hinman has left, but he did have a good question about visual impairment, and they want to know if this how well this works with screen readers, and I think that's a great question.
Yeah, so I know that we build things with 508 compliance in mind, so it does take into account those things. I can't say for certain where they are with that, but if it's not already, that is something that they are going to have. So it's something that we're mindful of.
Great. I think I answered Dr. Yang's question in the chat, but she's asking, is the dashboard unique to each user? And I believe the dashboard is initially a template and that you can configure it individually. And I think you covered that as well, but I just wanted to make sure that was reemphasized.
Yep.
Correct, right, Reggie?
Yep, that's correct.
And what about downloading material, Reggie? So last year in the selection portal, what we generally had was one giant file that was called the applicant data download, and folks would download that file. It's an Excel file, and they can manipulate it to have it transfer into their own CRMs, their systems like Slate and whatnot. If they want to download one big file that has pretty much all the applicant data on that, can they do that?
You can, and the way to set that up is just like we went through with the other export. So if you go here to the exports area and click Create Export, you do have to do all the configuration here. So you'll have to go in and decide, what data points you want and how you want them ordered and all of that. But as long as you're using a system that can take a CSV file, that can import, in one of these formats, either comma delimited, tab delimited, or fixed width, it'll work for you. So you just have to choose what fields that you want to be included, and it'll do that. The other thing that you'll have here is with the exports, there's an option here called default JSON. This is a kind of a more advanced type of export, but this is an export that some systems are using, information systems are using, and the format is just JSON instead of like a CSV or an Excel file, but that includes everything by default, so you won't have to format that. If you're importing into a system that can take a JSON file, that'll include all the data for you, so you don't need to configure it.
And Dr. Kulik had a good question about the VA access, and I know that we had access a few days ago, and I'm not sure what happened, but we're working with OAA, Dr. Kulik, to get this resolved. He's asking if he has to use a personal account since it's being blocked by VA computers, but I guarantee you a few days ago we had this working with them, and I'm not sure if something got reset, but OAA, Jeff Bates and Aaron Patel are both working on this right now. So hopefully that will get returned access and you won't have to do that.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah,
and
one thing to point out about that too is you'll want to make sure when you put in your put in the web address, and this might be unrelated, but it could be related as well. When you put in the address that you're using for admissions, you want to make sure to not have a www in front of it. It's just the address without the www. So that could be an issue that some have run into. You'll just want to make sure that's the case.
Thank you, Reggie. I know we're getting close on time here. I had put contact information in the chat, but because I'm having a hard time reading the chat, I want to make sure that other people can read it. Can you see the contact information?
Joni, stretch that bottom of that window down, the questions expand out, but it's kind of late for me to tell you that.
Okay. But as you see here, okay, so Reggie's showing the contact information down here at the bottom. So again, anybody who didn't get the email, go ahead and call that number or reach out to that email address and we can help you with getting access to your account.
Mm-hmm. And Joni, we're going to, once we can decipher, I haven't been able to see any questions for some reason, and but we are going to try to create a document with the Q&A and make that available and put up on the APPIC webpage. So assuming that we can download these questions.
I know, like they're there and we can see them. We just can't see them very easily. But so the system should allow us to download these questions. So if we didn't answer your question today, we will get to it. And we're going to use, a lot of the common questions that come up, we'll probably add as like common FAQs and whatnot within the help center. So yeah, so we'll definitely get back to you. There's a lot of questions that came in and we definitely covered a lot today. And I definitely want to thank everybody for joining us, and thank you, Reggie. Do we want to ask any few more questions or anything else you wanted, any parting words anybody want to say?
Thanks for your patience. We are problem solving, and this is going to be a wonderful platform, and it's got great potential, and hopefully the basics will get you more than what you need at this year, but I guarantee you'll want to take advantage of some of the new features as you get more comfortable with using this platform. And hang in there. It's like learning a new language, as with every technology kind of thing. So we're finding a few bugs here and there. We're trying to fix them as we find them.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to just alert folks who, if you get contacted by a prospective applicant that they're having trouble locating your program within the APPIC portal on their end, what's happening with that is the name of the program that gets uploaded automatically into the APPIC portal for the students to select is the exact name that you've entered into the National Match Service as your program name. And that sometimes, especially for the longer titled programs like long consortiums, it looks sometimes can be quite different than what you've listed on the APPIC happening. But the super easy fix, well, one is you can go back to either the APPIC directory or NMS and log into your portal and change the name. But also the easiest instruction you can give to a prospective applicant is no problem, just use the search by state filter and it pops up every time. And it's really easy. I've added that on-screen instruction right on the ad program page, so it's front and center for them. But that's, I've been getting a few of those questions, and it's always related to the name discrepancy between what's listed in the APPIC directory and the National Match Service.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing that up, Kimberly. Yeah. Sorry, Jeff. I was just going to say that the search feature also sometimes has troubles when the name contains like a hyphen or a dash. It sees that as one whole word and it doesn't recognize it sometimes. So your best option, as Kimberly said, usually is to search by state.
All right. Mm-hmm. And a plug for Mary Mendoza Newman in sending out all those emails to update your directory. I have a list of 15 here that did not update their directory. And this year, if you did not update your due date for your or applications, you got removed from the portal for applicants. And there was only 15 out of the 770 of you. So that's not terrible, but we're working on contacting all 15 of them, and 7 have already responded. So thanks for that. And thanks to Mary for sending out that dutiful email. And thanks to all of you for updating your sites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the system, it wasn't APPIC removing them from the portal. It's an automatic, the system just registers, once the due date gets forwarded from the directory into the APPIC portal, it just automatically registers it as a past inactive program because it was a 2019 deadline. It wasn't an APPIC decision.
No.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So.
Right.
Wonderful.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. As Jeff said, this is a new process, so there will be some hiccups, but we are here to help you all, and please do reach out to us for any assistance that you might need. Thank you, everyone, today for joining and helping along with the webinar and answering questions. And Reggie, you did a great presentation. I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions coming in. But thank you all, and have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thank you, Joni. Thank you, Reggie. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.